I want to start this video with a question. Do you find the entire boundary conversation, personal boundaries, how to do it, what to say, what they are, what it means, do you find that a bit confusing, perhaps a little overwhelming? Well, if you are nodding your head, you're in the exact right place at the exact right time, because in this video, that is exactly what I'm going to be hitting. The areas in our life where we need personal boundaries, the types of boundaries, and how you can identify boundary violations and some scripts for healthy boundaries, how you can assert healthy boundaries. I'm giving you some scripts. So before we get started, if you don't know me, my name is Terri Cole, and I have a book coming out on April 20th, 2021 called Boundary Boss, The Essential Guide to Talk True, Be Seen, and Finally Live Free. Wow, I'm so excited. So before we get moving into the content today, I want to make sure that if you are watching this video that you are subscribed to my channel. So please hit that little bell so you could get a notice every time something new drops. And I'm doing lots of new stuff lately. So if you're interested in boundaries and learning, please subscribe. Okay, so let's begin. The content of today's episode, basically, is why don't we start with identifying boundaries? What are they? So the act itself of drawing boundaries is simply being clear about what is okay and what is not okay with you to the people in your life, right? The relationships that you're in, just telling the truth about how you feel. But if you were raised in a family system that did not teach you what healthy boundaries were or are, and let's be honest, most of us were, that you learned about dysfunctional boundaries. You learned about them backwards, so to speak. And it's not something, it's difficult to set healthy boundaries if you never learned. Personal boundaries are invisible and they're unique to each person. So it's not the same as like a fence around a house, right? You can see that. This is different because there's more nuances and you have to establish that fence with actual words, which we are going to be hitting a little bit later in this episode, where I will actually be giving you some scripts so that you can assert yourself when you experience a boundary violation, because so much of the time we have no idea what to do. Okay, personal boundaries are unique to you. So here's the thing. I am going to give you some scripts, and your job is going to be to make it your own. But at least you'll have the beginning of the process. Think of personal boundaries as kind of this guidebook that you create that clearly identifies permissible ways for other people to behave towards you. Interactions that are permissible in your life. So they come in different categories. So physical, sexual, material, mental, and emotional. So those are the main areas. So let's start with physical, right? Your most basic physical boundary is your body. So this includes who has permission to touch you and how, plus how much personal space you may need, right? Someone grabbing you without your permission, using your deodorant or your toothbrush, without your permission, or barging into the bathroom, let's say, if you're in the tub or if you're going to the bathroom without knocking, those are all examples of physical boundary violations, just so that we're all on the same page. So let's look at what could it sound like, right? What does asserting a healthy physical boundary might sound like? Hey, don't come into my room without knocking. That's it. I'd like to make a simple request that you knock before you come into my room, and do not barge into the bathroom ever when I'm in there. I would add that as well. But again, you can always make it easy and light and simple. You are making a simple request. If you need to become more assertive, you can. But we need to let people know what is okay and not okay. And that is one easy way to do it. Let's move into sexual boundaries. Listen, you and you alone get to decide what is acceptable to you around sexual touch, right? That you are self-determined there. How you want to be touched, when, you want to be touched and by whom. So someone coercing or forcing you to be sexual with them, making a lewd comment, or behaving in any way that is intended to arouse or gratify their own sexual impulse without your expressed consent are examples of sexual boundary violation. So we've got the examples. You understand someone touching you, grabbing you, massaging your shoulders, any of those things. Those are violations if you don't want it, if it is unwelcome, and if you have expressly said no. So what does it look like to assert healthy boundaries? Well, discussing safe sex, right? That is one thing that I think a lot of you have written into me saying that it's difficult to have the conversation, to initiate it, and you can make it super simple. If you're planning on having sex with someone and you want to let them know you practice safe sex, you can simply say, I have a condom. If you don't, I don't have unprotected sex. That's it. That's not a negotiation, because here's the thing. There are some boundaries that, and I write about this pretty extensively in the book, that are deal breakers, right? There are some that are more preferences. There are some that are more desires, like nice to have. Then there are some that are really non-negotiable. And if you are someone who does not engage in unsafe sex, then that would be a non-negotiable boundary. So stating it like, I don't have unprotected sex, is very clear about where you stand. And in each one of these categories, I have written a couple of scripts for you in each category that I will tell you how to get at the end of this episode. Okay, moving into material boundaries. This is how you relate to your stuff. This is how you want others to relate to your stuff. So how may others access the things that you own? So this includes, like, do you lend money? Do you not lend money? Do you lend your car if you have a car? Or things now this is to your friends and to your relatives as well, but under what conditions do you do those things? What are the stipulations? It could also be in your home, right? What area of your home is off limits to others? Is anyone allowed to go anywhere? Are the kids allowed to go into your bedroom? Do people need to take their shoes off when they come into your home? Especially in New York, that is pretty popular because New York is even pre-COVID, New York is a pretty dirty place. And the only way anyone knows that is if you tell them. So someone using your computer, let's say without your permission, or taking clothes out of your closet, or leaving garbage in your clean car. Some people care about their car and want it to be clean. That literally, those are all examples of material boundary violation. So I created a script if someone asks you to borrow money. You can simply say, I actually have a no lending money policy. So it's not personal, but the answer will have to be no. That is super clear. And as much as these types of boundaries can be challenging to draw, and I understand that, I can tell you from my own life experience, if you don't, you are really protecting your relationships unless you're going to have a drawn up written agreement around money that you're lending to a friend or a family member. I've been a therapist for almost 25 years, and I don't know of one time, unless it was a legal and binding document, that there wasn't some kind of a shit show that happened because someone lent someone money. So it's either they lend you money, and even if they forgive the loan or you forgive the loan, there's still resentment. There's resentment in there that the person borrowed it, and that every time you see them, or this was my experience years ago when I lent money to a friend, every time I saw that person doing anything that required money, I was like, oh, they have money to go out to dinner, but not money to pay me back. Like, no. After that experience, I was like, okay, you need better boundaries when it comes to your material possessions, especially money, because it is a very loaded situation. But in the guide that I created for you that you'll get at the end, there are other scenarios about your car, about sharing clothing and doing it with a stipulation. So there'll be other things for you to check out. What about mental boundaries? So this is about what you think. This is your values, your opinions. In order to have mental boundaries, right, you must first know what you believe. Like, what do you think about things? It also means that you can listen to others, and even if you don't agree with them, you can hear what they're saying. You're not taking it personally, right, if you disagree. And I know that this has been something I've gotten many, many emails from you guys about in the past, I'd say, year and a half in the US, more actually, around politics and other things that have been happening with the pandemic, of how do you deal with those things without taking it personally. And that really means having really good mental boundaries and understanding that. And can you be with other people who disagree with you and you know you're the minority opinion, but can you still hold on to your opinion? Right? Is it okay to think differently and to express that? Right? Someone making demands instead of requests, disparaging your beliefs, disrespecting your no. Now, these are all mental boundary violations. If someone is trying to wear down your no, you've said no and they keep coming back, that is a mental boundary violation. So I gave you an example with this script of if someone is making you wrong about what you believe or trying to convince you or change your mind, you can say, I will have to, ask you to agree to disagree because we do disagree, and I won't tolerate you belittling my opinion. So that would be a boundary where you're saying, I'm not continuing this conversation. This is not working for me. So agreeing to disagree, but you have to speak it rather than getting sucked into that vortex of the conversation. Because when you have really different opinions than someone else, what I think you find is that especially when people become very polarized, I'm not saying don't have a good debate. A debate is okay, but not when it gets personal, not when someone is putting you down or you're putting someone else down. That's where a boundary needs to come into place so that the conversation is respectful. Okay, the next is emotional boundaries. So you and you alone are responsible for your feelings, just as others are responsible for theirs. So healthy emotional boundaries prevent you from giving spontaneous criticism or unsolicited advice to everyone in the world. Anybody? Anybody? Do you feel like someone has a situation and you cannot wait to tell them what to do? That means you need to work on strengthening your emotional boundaries. Another thing is that if you have strong emotional and healthy emotional boundaries, you don't blame others for the way that you feel. You know you're responsible for your feelings, and if you need to make changes, then you got to figure out what those changes are. And on the flip side, you don't accept blame for how someone else feels, even if they're very skilled at blaming. When you have healthy emotional boundaries, you know what is your side of the street and what is someone else's side of the street. So if you tend to get super emotional, combative, defensive, that is an indication of having disordered emotional boundaries. And someone who invalidates another person's feelings or tells you how you should feel, like you shouldn't feel that way, that's ridiculous. That is an emotional boundary violation. Someone asking intrusive questions, that is an emotional boundary violation, right? So what would it sound like to assert healthy boundaries, right? In the guise underneath the emotional boundary situation, you may shut down a conversation if someone is trying to talk about something heavy right before you have a big meeting or something. You can say, I actually don't have the bandwidth to have this conversation now. I'm making a simple request that we pick it up tomorrow. I have time after 3 p.m. Or something to that effect, where it's not saying, I'm never talking about it, but it's not being blindsided by what someone else wants if that is going against what is best for you, right? That is what you need to know, is what is best for you. And that's what healthy boundaries actually create for you. So when you think about people in your life and yourself, there are different kinds of boundaries. Some people have very porous boundaries. So if you have porous boundaries, you might overshare personal information, say yes when you want to say no, find yourself taking on and overly investing in the problems and issues of other people. So I'm shouting out to my codependents right there. And you might put up with disrespectful or abusive behavior. Those are all indications of having boundaries that are too malleable. They are too porous. That's what porous means. If you have rigid boundaries, you might not ask for help when you need it, avoid close relationships to minimize being rejected, be perceived by others as detached, unreachable, a little bit cold, or you might tend to isolate yourself. You have that feeling like, I don't do complicated emotions, right? You might pull yourself out of those experiences. So those are the two sort of extremes. And of course, the one in the middle is healthy boundaries. So what do they look like? Well, you might value your own thoughts and opinions, feel comfortable asking for and accepting help when you need it, know when to share your personal information and with whom, right? So it's a gradual thing. You're not falling into the intimacy trap, which can definitely be a trap. And you can accept and respect the boundaries of others, including someone saying no to a request. So that was a bunch of information. Of course, there's more and more and more like that in the book. Obviously, it's an entire book on boundaries, how to become a boundary boss. So cultivating healthy personal boundaries. This requires learning something, right? This requires discernment, and really probably a long overdue look at your relationships, your interactions, the way you are in the world and how you relate to yourself, because our boundaries, personal boundaries, don't just include the way we relate to others. I have a whole entire thing about this in the book about your boundaries, internal boundaries, meaning how you relate to you, which really does impact everything else. So this is to protect you from emotional harm. Keep your personal dignity intact. That is what healthy boundaries, that's what they do for you. And that's what being a boundary boss can do for you. It also strengthens your relationships, not makes them weaker, which is what a lot of people think. And most importantly, it makes the relationship you have with yourself better, which is the beginning and the end of all the things. So if you found this content helpful, oh hi, as I said before, I wrote a book about boundaries called Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. So you can go to boundarybossbook.com and pre-order the book now. And it's super easy to do it. Once you pre-order, you can follow the simple steps to get immediate access to all of the free book bonuses plus the special pre-order bonus package, which is going to include these healthy scripts, a whole entire list of scripts that I created for you. And actually, these are additional scripts that are not actually in the book. So you can get started right now with creating better boundaries in your life and in your relationships. You can get it all at boundarybossbook.com. Yes, right now. Type it in, boundarybossbook.com, and pre-order. And I want to say thank you for your time today. I super appreciate it. And as always, take care of you.